Well, good morning, everybody. This is our February 10, 2022 Ethics Roundtable. And we're very excited to have Sloan Gonzales. Sloan is an Ethics Fellow at UCCS for this academic year. Of course, she does know that once a fellow, always a fellow. So we are very happy to have Sloan working with us. Sloan is the director of the Chancellor's Leadership class and UCCSlead. So I think that you will enjoy her presentation, and we hope that you will learn something about how to bring the Daniels Fund Ethics Initiative principles into an ethics and leadership type of program. So there we go. Thank you, Sloan.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be with you all virtually, talking today about some of my favorite topics, ethics and leadership. And I truly mean that. I'm an ethics fellow because I actually am an ethics nerd and love to just dive into it and learn more about it. And I'm excited to do that with you all this morning. So just a little bit about me, and then we'll kind of talk through kind of what our plan is for the day. So as Tracy mentioned, my name is Sloan Gonzales. I am the program director for some of our student leadership programs here at UCCS, and I also have the privilege of teaching in the Department of Communications in the area of leadership and intercultural communication. And so just a little bit more about me. I am a UCCS Mountain Lion through and through. I have both my undergrad and my master's from UCCS. So I have the privilege of being a student, an alumni, a faculty member, and a staff member. I've worn pretty much every hat you can wear in those roles, including being student employee, graduate student employee, all the things in between. So I really like to bring that perspective when I'm working with our students to kind of just try and put myself back into their perspective as much as possible. A couple of things about me before I came into this position. I spent about 10 years in the nonprofit sector here in Colorado Springs, running community leadership programs. So I've been working with young leaders from high school, college, post-college, millennial types leaders for the past 10 years. So truly leadership development and developing young leaders is where I thrive. In addition to that, I also do a lot of consulting work and community speaking around the areas of DEI, leadership, culture building, and communications. So just really kind of a little bit of a framework as we're talking about building on our ethical frameworks, kind of where mine come from. And then kind of what we're going to talk about today, why you're here. You're not just here to hear from me, you're here to learn hopefully a few new things or maybe reinforce some of the things that you already know about ethics. So how we're going to build our day, our framework, is starting with what is the UCCSlead program, just so you have an idea of what it is and what we're doing in regards to ethics with it, the why. Why did I feel like this project needed to happen? Why are we weaving ethics more intentionally into this leadership program? Looking at a couple of tools and concepts that we're using this year that we're calling everyday ethical leadership, and exploring those tools. So a little more interaction today. So I'm going to get you maybe talking, turning your camera on, so it's not just me for the next hour talking to you is my goal. And then we'll debrief and do questions at the end as well. You're doing good. Perfect. So let me just tell you a little bit about the UCCSlead program. I'd love to see maybe like a raise of hands or maybe like in the chat, who has heard of the UCCSlead program? Whether you've seen a flyer, you're like, I send my students to it. Where's your familiarity with the UCCSlead program? Okay, just looking at everyone's things, okay? Perfect. So a good kind of mix of people who are like, no idea what you're talking about. The UCCS name is in there, probably has to do with leadership. Perfect, wonderful. Well, UCCSlead has been around for about 8 years, and it came as an initiative from our former Chancellor, Dr. Pam Shockley-Zalabak. And at the time of the creation of this program, there really wasn't anything on our campus that was truly a leadership program for all students. We had a lot of kind of affinity, niche kind of leadership programs that maybe were offered by a college or a specific scholarship or a program that students had to apply for, qualify for, meet certain requirements to take advantage of, which is great. We need those types of leadership programs. I run one of those leadership programs. But we realized at the time, there wasn't anything that truly said, we believe all UCCS students should have access to leadership development. And how can we provide that? Enter UCCSlead. So over the last 8 years, this program has morphed, evolved, changed to truly find the right chemistry, the right formula in regards to what does it mean to truly be a student leadership program. That is what our students need in the current time that they are in. And as you know, over the last 8 years, over the last 2 years, right, those needs change and they evolve. And so this program, much like that, is constantly evolving and growing. Each year there's changes, there's adjustments, but we have kind of this core mission, which is to develop engaged, ethical, world-changing leaders. So you see the magic word, right? Ethics is in the mission statement. And so from the beginning, this has always been something that was important to the UCCSlead program of teaching ethics, showing the relationship between ethics and leadership. And kind of how we do this and what this looks like is kind of in our core program pillars, which is this idea of everyday leadership. So what does it mean to show up and be a leader in every single aspect of our life? That it's not just when we're in the big leadership positions, that's when we're a leader. That it's those little ways that we show up for ourselves and for others, that's leadership, and showing students what their leadership potential is. Looking at leadership from this lens of what we call heart set and mindset, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. And then finally, the really big goal of this program is our leadership pathways. It's great that a student comes and does a leadership program for the day and they have some fun, they learn some things, but we want them to do something with it. We hope that this will be a launch point or a foundation point where they can build their leadership journey here at UCCS. And we really see our role as a department to help students find what that unique pathway is. So we do a lot of work with students, not just in that one-day experience, but through supplemental programming like our student leadership conference, or to just checking in with them. We do intentional emails to students that attend our program saying, hey, you set these goals. Have you joined a club yet? Club fairs next week, and getting them connected on campus and helping kind of be that information desk, if you will, to guide them to those right places. And then how this program looks in an actual kind of format is it's a 5-hour interactive, experiential kind of based experience. So it's not a conference. We don't have like a keynote. Students aren't being talked at for 5 hours. It's very high energy, very activity based. And it's led by myself, another facilitator, and a student facilitator. So we really use a mix of facilitation styles in this kind of 5-hour experience. Upon completion, students receive a leadership certificate and a graduation cord. So they have this great experience and they get some kind of additional benefits from attending. So that's kind of the leadership, the kind of UCCSlead program, what it's been, what we were doing. And at the last spring, when I was talking with Tracy about, different opportunities, and, we've been collaborating and working together since I've been in this role for the last 3 years. But I realized that even though ethics is in our mission statement, and yes, we talk about leadership and we talk about some of these ethical principles kind of by accident, there was no intentional connection between leadership and ethics in our program. And for ethics being a mission statement, we didn't actually even use the word ethics in the entire 5-hour program, which is a little problemsome. And so that was really the goal of this project, was to say, okay, where can we weave in ethics in a really intentional, organic way to show the relationship between ethics and leadership? And so the first step of this, I'm going to engage you kind of in my first kind of step of research and where I spent a lot of early fall was asking the question, what are ethics and why are ethics important in our leadership from the perspective of students? I know the answer to this question from a personal perspective, but I wanted to know what students thought when they heard the word ethics. So we're gonna do an activity. So you might have to turn your camera on, unmute, maybe get in the chat. But I'd love to hear, put your kind of student hat on, okay? If you are a student, give us that perspective too. But tell me, from a student lens, how would you define ethics? Are they important? Do you think about them on a regular basis? What do you think a student's perspective on ethics are? Don't be shy, our students aren't. So tell me what you think.
Hi, this
Yeah.
is Jennifer. One of the things that I think is important to students, sorry, my camera's not quite angled right, I apologize. So I think one of the things that's important to students, among many other things concerning ethics and leadership, I think students need to feel that the learning environment is safe and that the leaders have integrity, and that I really think that for the environment to be safe. And I mean, I know sometimes for students to learn, they have to be like challenged outside of their comfort zone. So I'm not saying that we don't try to challenge students. I just think for students to feel like it's safe, like all ideas are welcome, that it's a safe learning environment, and we're there to support each other to kind of move forward. So those are some things that I think about. Thank you.
I like that, thank you. I see in the chat that it's doing the right thing. It's the definition of what is right or wrong. Anyone else want to share? Good.
Hi, Sloan, this is Ellen. I do think that students are thinking about ethics all of the time. And I think that that's been highlighted in our work with students when they're talking even about remote learning or in-person learning, some of the differences. There's a lot of discussion around ethics in how faculty are presenting information to students. Some students share that it's unethical when my faculty is just showing, a previous semester's slide and they don't even update the dates in the syllabi. And then, you can have conversations with those students around why does that feel wrong or why does that feel unethical. But I do think it's something that they're thinking about constantly and that we need to be thinking about too as we're working with students. And that's just an example that has come up a lot in the last year. So I have a million other examples, but that's a common one that frustrated students come in with, is this online versus in-person learning experience, and some discussion around whether or not flipped courses are ethical, where you are presenting information in an online format and then the class is more like an office hour or discussion. I've heard that come up for a lot of students lately as well.
I love that. Thanks for sharing, Ellen. There's a lot in the chat too. And what I think is really interesting about every answer you're giving is spot on, right? All of these things are definitions of what it means to be ethical, how we look at the role ethics plays kind of in our society, on our campus, the importance of it. But when I ask students specifically, right, like, what are ethics? And tell me about them. And do you think about them? And do you care about them? These were the common responses. Ethics are boring. Or they were kind of indifferent to the idea of them, right? They weren't like, we kind of have a joke of like, if I said, come to UCCS ethics, no one would come to the program. But I say, come to UCCSlead, and because lead is a buzzword, it has a different pull than maybe ethics does, right? And, or this idea that ethics are important, but shouldn't we be talking about things like social justice or being a servant leader or being a team player or emotional intelligence or other things, right? When I say what's the role of ethics and leadership? It was always like, yeah, ethics are important, but this is more important, right? Not realizing that everything that you all just said are ethics, right? And that students aren't seeing the correlation and the everyday role that ethics is playing in their decision-making and what they want out of their experiences and the kind of way they want to be interacted with, the way that they want to present themselves as a human being, as a leader on our campus. All of these things are ethics. But when we actually try and define it, and when we try and put a word to it, they're not framing it that way. They're not seeing it sometimes from that framework. And so that's really where, as kind of my project this year with the UCCSlead program was, how do I first show the actual connection between ethics and leadership? And how those things actually correlate together. And this idea and this metaphor that ethics are a lot like breathing. And this is kind of the framework that I've used this last year, is when we think about breathing, it's something that we typically don't think about, right? Like you just do it. All of you are sitting there listening to me talk and you're breathing. And probably most of you are not sitting there going, take a breath. I'm breathing right now. Breathing is important. I need breathing in order to sustain life. And we don't think that way, right? We just do it because we know how to. We've been taught. We know that it's important. But what happens when you walk a flight of stairs, or you work out for the first time in a few months, or you're sick, right? And there's this tension, right? There's something happening that's forcing you to remember how to breathe, right? When I walk the stairs in the university center to get coffee sometimes, I'm remembering that I need to know how to breathe, right? And or when I'm nervous before I started today, right? Took some intentional breaths before starting. There was something that was forcing me to think about breathing. And a lot of the times that's true with ethics. When we experience tension, when our students are at a crossroad, when they're coming out of a pandemic or still in a pandemic, right? Things are changing, things are shifting. That's when it becomes more relevant. That's when it all of a sudden it's like, oh, I need to think about these things, right? That's why we call them ethical dilemmas, right? When we are faced with something, it makes us look inward and say, what's making me think this way, decide this way, act this way? What is that framework? What is that foundation? Are those principles? And so that's really what we do in UCCSlead now, is we kind of make them think about that tension, and we make them begin to unlock and unpack the role that ethics plays, particularly in their leadership. And so one of the ways we do this is through a really fun activity that I'm going to have you do with me now. And it's our effective leadership activity. So I have two quotes here from two leaders from our kind of current history. So I'll let you read them. And I'd love either in the chat or again, unmute yourself. But tell me, do these quotes resonate with you? How would you describe these leaders? Would you think that maybe they're effective, successful? What comes to mind when you see these quotes? What do you think?
Hey, this is Monica. I just want to say the first one makes me think that this is a leader who is very happy to have conversation and to continually communicate. If they're willing to be misunderstood, that means they're willing to share what they really mean. So that's definitely an aspect of leadership.
I like that, Monica. Thank you. What else? What other things pop out from these quotes that make you go, ooh, that's what a leader is, or that's the kind of leader maybe I connect with? Confident, transparent, honest. I like that, Alicia, in the chat. Anyone else? Do these quotes not resonate with anyone? That's a good question too. Good. The value of honesty and transparency. Good. Some trust. Ethics principle there. Good. What else? Oh, truth is subjective. I like that, Whitley. Good, good. So we do this with our students. So what we do at UCCSlead, one of our opening activities is on all of the tables, there is a quote that are from different leaders from our time, and students pick a table, they sit at a table that the quote resonates with them. And their first conversation with those at their table, kind of the icebreaker, is to talk about the quote. Why did you sit here? Sometimes they just sat there and they have to then talk about the quote. But usually we kind of prompt them to say, hey, walk around the room, find a quote that maybe resonates with you a little bit or makes you think, and talk about why you picked that quote. And then we'll tell you later who they are, and we'll build on kind of their principles of leadership. And so students sit down and they talk about these, and we get going on our day. And I start with each session after we, do welcomes and, logistics and all that kind of thing, defining leadership. And how we define leadership in UCCSlead is that the goal of a leader is to inspire or influence change or action. Just kind of a simple definition to help them kind of thinking that a goal of a leader is to inspire and influence change or action. And so looking at these quotes, we can agree that an effective leader is displayed in these quotes, right? They are probably doing some things that are inspiring and influencing change or action. But then we throw a little bit of a curveball at the students, because then we tell them who said these quotes. And here's the thing. These quotes are typically from some unethical leaders, or some leaders that might have some gray in regards to the world of ethics, and that are people that we have debated throughout our history, even currently, in regards to if they are truly an ethical leader. So for example, our first quote, Amazon, I don't think he's actually the current one anymore, but Jeff Bezos from Amazon. And then Julian Assange from WikiLeaks, which is the founder of WikiLeaks, is our second quote here. And we have probably 10 to 15 quotes that are on these tables. And they range from some pretty big, historic, warlords like Stalin, for example, to Snowden, to Jeff Bezos, just kind of a myriad, right? And these students kind of have this reaction of I sat at the Stalin table. I cannot believe that I said right? But it shows this idea of effective versus ethical leadership. And that you can look at a lot of what we would call unethical leaders, and they were effective, right? They had principles, they had ideas, they had a vision, they had a work ethic, right? They inspired or influenced change or action, and they were effective in that. Were they ethical in their leadership? Usually not, right? And so beginning to start to build this foundation with students that ethical leadership is this idea of inspiring or influencing positive change or action, and having our conversation with these students on what is positive, right? Who defines what's positive change or action? So again, inviting them into the conversation to talk about it and start to let them see and realize that they don't usually agree on what is positive. I think WikiLeaks is a great example of that, right? A lot of people aligned with the quote and aligned with a lot of what WikiLeaks did, right? Which was exposing the truth and doing these sorts of things. But the way they did that was in some unethical ways, right? And so kind of going with what Whitley said of truth is subjective, right? It's not always this black and white, good or bad. Ethics can sometimes be some gray, and that ethics a lot of the times is about navigating that gray space. And when we really lean on our ethical principles is when we are in a space where we don't actually know what is right or wrong, or when we're just kind of in this place of uncertainty because it's not this clear cut kind of idea, or when maybe I think this is right and you think this is right. We can think of probably 5 different examples in current history right now that are happening where we don't agree on what is ethical or not. So what happens when the good, the positive isn't the same? How do we navigate that as a leader? And so this is where we start building in the principles with them to say, as a person, as a leader, we have to know who we are, and we have to know what our ethical principles are, so that when we come to those places of tension, we're able to lean on those and go, no, I value integrity. And this is what integrity means to me personally, so that when I'm in a situation, I can communicate and articulate what integrity is. And I go, of course, we all think integrity is important. No one's going to be like, I don't value integrity. What does that actually mean? Right? And so we do another activity with students where they have to build on what we call their traits of character. And we've woven all of the ethical principles into these traits of character, where they have to go around the room and identify where they feel strong. Like, I identify with honesty, and I think that I am an honest person. And I think that's one of my strengths as a leader, is to be honest. And they talk about that. And then we go on the other side of it, and we have them look at, where are the areas of opportunity, right? I value transparency, but I don't know if I'm necessarily the most transparent person. That's something I probably could work on and learn more about, right? Beginning to show students too that there is no perfect leader, right? That no leader has every single one of these traits of character, every single one of these ethical principles, like knocked out, ready to go to use when they need them, right? That it takes development, and it takes growth, and it takes knowing our strengths and our areas of opportunity. And so that's really how we started to frame the beginning of our kind of session with them. And this idea of everyday leadership is helping them see that in order to be a strong and effective ethical leader, it takes the things that we do on an everyday basis, how we show up for ourselves and for others. And how we show up for ourselves is by developing ourselves. It's by attending things like UCCSlead. It's about doing the work and asking the questions of, yes, I say that I think I should be this way, or I think a leader should be this. What does that actually look like and mean for me personally? So the day is really focused on this introspective look at leadership, with a lot of discussion, debriefs, conversations happening with our students that are led by their peers. I don't lead those small groups. We have peers in the room who are trained peer leaders who lead those discussion questions to get students really thinking and having a more introspective approach to kind of this idea of everyday ethical leadership. So I'm going to pause there for a second, see if there are questions, and then I'll talk about kind of a few other activities that we're incorporating. Questions, comments? Let's make sure. Okay. Feel free to put them in the chat too, if you're not someone who's like wants to ask a question in front of everybody.
Well, and I have a question.
Yes.
With the activity that you do, are there some students that have some pain point realizing that what they thought was very black and white is really shades of gray?
Yes. And I think a lot of times that comes in where we talk about the traits of character, and when they have to look at where they're not strong, like where their areas of growth are. Because when you see like, these are, you know, traits of character that are really important to, you know, and being an ethical leader. And as students, one of them, for example, is empathy, is one of them listed. And we did a session with a group of peer tutors for one of the Excel centers. And they were a group of, there was one in particular that was like, I'm realizing that I am not an empathetic person. And I'm in a role that requires me to be empathetic because I'm a peer tutor and I'm supposed to be empathizing and, you know, but to watch them unpack that. And that's why we do those small discussion groups. So they're not just sitting in that for 5 hours going, ooh, I don't know how I feel about this. Or did I really resonate with that quote? Or, you know, just whatever that might be. So having these intentional spaces throughout where they can reflect both, we do kind of reflection in 3 ways. We do individual reflection. So anytime before we enter into what we call table talks, which is the peer facilitated conversations, they have time to have like a little box in their workbook to do some self-reflection. So if they are a student that's more introspective and needs that time to process, we're hitting that learning style. Then they have the small group where they can talk. And then we also do large group because some students really thrive and want to share their voice. And so giving that opportunity for them to, answer to the whole group a takeaway or a highlight that they had. And sometimes no one says anything. And I'm like, great, let's move on. Other times we have really engaging conversations in the large group as well. But again, it just allows students to touch at each of those points so that they're able to kind of discuss it and debrief it. And our facilitators are trained in how to have those conversations and also when to get help if for some reason it's going the wrong way. And so if I'm facilitating on stage, I have my other co-facilitator who's walking the room to provide that support and vice versa, so that we're not leaving our students also kind of being like, I don't know how to help the student. They can grab one of us to help them as well.
Thanks, Sloan.
Yeah. I'm just reading the one that's in the chat, and if someone else has a question, hop in. That's a great point, Steve. So that's something that we talk about when we get into this kind of next section. And I use myself as an example. Steve's question in the chat was, do you think a strong leader understands their weakness and have people around them to offset their weakness? So we typically use the word areas of growth or opportunity instead of weakness in UCCSlead, because I think students sometimes think, well, I'm broken or I'm not, good because I don't have this skill, versus saying it's a skill. You can develop it, you can grow it, and become stronger in it. And there are going to be things that you are naturally going to be more gifted in, and there are others that you're not. And so I use the example of one of the traits of character we use is creativity. I am not a creative person by nature, right? I'm not someone who's like super artistic. This PowerPoint is a template from Canva, thank goodness. But I talk about the fact that I have built my team with creative people. I have a phenomenal student employee who develops our flyers and our PowerPoints and the PowerPoint we use. And I credit her for that in that moment to say, I know that that's not where I shine, that that's not my strength. So I surround myself with people so that we can be a more cohesive team. I talk about that as well. We teach juggling as part of the day, and I am not great at hand-eye coordination. It took me 2 years. I tried, and you don't want me teaching juggling. Guess what? My other co-facilitator is a phenomenal juggler. I'll shout out Cody because he's in here. Great juggler. That's where he shines. Great. That's your place. My place is here, right? And so knowing those things allows us to lean on other people and not try and think that we have to be everything for everyone. Because that's, again, not an effective leader. That's an overstretched leader who's not leaning on those around them. And so, again, beginning to show them that by saying, we don't say you should have all of these things. We say pick 1 or 2 that are your strengths and 1 or 2 that are areas of growth. There's still 12 other things on that list that they haven't even touched on. But who around you are those things, and building on that kind of framework throughout our day. Any other questions before we talk about heart set? Perfect. Well, this is my favorite part of the day when we talk about UCCSlead. So if you remember, I said there's 4 pillars with UCCSlead. The first is that everyday leadership that we just talked about. And that's really where we spend a lot of time in the fall implementing activities and intentional conversations around the ethical principles. We wove them into our debrief questions. We talked about them in the physical, like how we defined, right? We used the word ethics, which we had not been using. And I think some of that was because of this idea. I wasn't here when the program was fully being created, but I think in some ways it was that thing of, well, ethics are boring. We don't want to say that. So we'll use these fun buzzwords, right? We'll talk about innovative and introspective and all these things that we've created to make leadership somehow more fun and exciting, right? When it's like, no, for me, ethics are exciting, right? Clearly, I'm getting excited about it, talking about it, but how do we show them how relevant that it is, right? That it's as woven into leadership as breathing is to us living, right? Like we need it, and that we don't always see it. And so the second pillar of our program is this idea of heart set. And we talk about that effect for a leader, they have to be in tune with their mindset and their heart set, right? And that a leader is someone who leads themselves and others and how they show up for themselves and others. And so mindset is the self part, right? We work with them on conquering limiting beliefs and, teaching them the importance of growth mindset and the idea of the power of yet. If you're familiar with the growth mindset theory, they learn to juggle, as that's where they learn to juggle, is showing like, I can't juggle yet. If we give you tools, if we give you coaching, let's see what we can do, right? So we focus on that part of leadership with them. Our heart set is the leading others. It's them beginning to understand the role that connection and relationship plays in leadership. And so how we wove ethics into this heart set is in a few different ways. And we're spending a lot of spring with the help of my amazing student ambassador, Alicia, to build in more activities in line with this heart set concept and the ethical principles. And so the first way that we are doing this in the fall and continuing into our spring program is through our language and our vocabulary. Hopefully I've kind of emphasized that enough here in when we talk about these principles, when we use them, we don't skirt around them, we don't take them for granted. When we begin to truly say, like, this is what it means to be ethical. This is what it means to be transparent. This is the reason why we talk about things like the rule of law, right? That we need to understand what is the framework of our society, of our campus, what's that infrastructure, and why are those the decisions, and why should we align with them, right? Why is it important that we understand the why behind the rule, right? I think a great example we used a lot in regards to rule of law was the mask mandate, right? Of like understanding the why behind this. And it wasn't just, you have to wear a mask, put a mask on. Like, what's the reason? Why is it ethical for us to align with this policy, right? And again, having that conversation of, we might not always agree on that policy, right? But again, looking at this idea of common good as a definition of positive, change or action. What's the common good? And how can I make decisions, do things for the common good, right? So building on this idea of self-awareness, when I'm aware of the role that these ethical principles, that ethics has on my leadership, I'm more likely to lean on them or recognize when I'm in tension, right? That's really what we focus on with students was, if we can show you how to use ethics on a regular, everyday kind of basis and be thinking about the role that some of these principles play in your everyday decision-making and how you interact and work with those around you, when you get to a place where you need to lean on your ethics, when you need to lean on your values because there's something happening, it's a muscle that you've already been building and working. It's not all of a sudden I have to know how to make ethical decisions in a time when it is stressful and I don't have the ability to maybe do that. I already have that skill and that muscle worked, that it's a little bit easier to walk into some of those situations. It's a little bit easier to call out and say, hey, this is unethical. Like Ellen mentioned earlier with students saying, I don't think this is an ethical thing that we're doing. But if I'm not familiar with that language, if I'm not used to using that language, then I'm not going to necessarily maybe step out and call out unethical things. Because remember too, we answered all of these questions earlier when I talked about putting on kind of your student hat, still from the perspective of professionals, right? We have students that, yes, our students are amazing and they're phenomenal, but they're also, a lot of them are 18 to 21, right? 18 to 25 is kind of the primary demographic of our UCCSlead program. So for some of them, this is some of the few times and first times that they're talking about these things. And they're thinking about it in this way. And so how do we give them the right language so they can begin to understand where they're coming from and the impact that it's having on them? So the other way we do this with HeartSet, one of our second elements of HeartSet is this idea of empathy and trust. And so again, we're building in and weaving in those ethical principles into terms we already have, right? So trust and transparency and how those things connect, right? Looking at things like empathy and the role that respect plays in things like empathy, right? We're weaving these terms in as we're talking and discussing and teaching these concepts, so that they're hearing these words, right? They're not just, oh, look, here are the ethical principles. We're going to talk about them today. They're important. It's a natural conversation that we're having with them. And the more they hear them, the more familiar they become with them. We're piloting an activity here in about a week called the line in the sand activity, which is going to help them understand where they fall in tension. What happens when we're tested? What happens when we are faced with ethical dilemmas as leaders? Are we as rooted in our principles and our traits of character and our values as we might think we are? We also do a really great activity called value cards, where they actually have to select their values and the importance of that their values have. We talk a lot about values with this group around the importance of reevaluating our values, and that when we come through unique experiences like a pandemic, that it's important that we realign our values, that we check in. Because I know my values shifted after 2 years, and what I thought were maybe my primary values, they shifted and they changed. Many of us did. And so making sure that we're creating space and time to, again, check in with ourselves and have that self-awareness. The final part of HeartSet that we look at is this idea of communication, and particularly in regards to ethics, talking about communicating through difference. And so working with students on this idea that I talked about earlier of what happens when we don't actually agree on what is ethical, when we don't agree on what that positive change or action is, when we don't agree on things like our beliefs, our values, right? We know that we are unique individuals who bring our unique experiences into every single conversation and interaction that we have. And so working with students and talking with students on how do we have those conversations? What does it look like to have collaborative, healthy conversations with people? And I think this is probably one of the most pivotal things that we've added in our program in the last 2 years, because it was something that was so needed with the current state of the world, right? When there's so much yelling and debating and pointing fingers of who's right and who's wrong, and I just need to yell my point across. How do we teach students to be collaborative thinkers and collaborative communicators, where they can say, I see that you have a different perspective, a different idea, a different belief than I do. And how can we get to that shared meaning, right? The goal of any conversation is to get to a shared meaning. How do we get to that together? And sometimes the shared meaning is, we can't agree on this. Or maybe we shouldn't talk about this right now. We should focus on this thing that we can work on together and work through. Because you can't just cancel everybody. You can't cancel someone at work, right? You have to know how to work with people and talk with people and connect with people, but also learn how to have boundaries and know where your line is with certain things. And so we do a lot of work with our students as well, of helping them understand this idea of having uncomfortable, maybe challenging conversations, right, that are still woven in those ethical principles, right, that are still built on transparency and respect and accountability, right, that these people, that who we are talking with, are trying to build trust and respect with the other person. Those can be challenging conversations, but the goal is still to get to that shared meaning. Unsafe conversations are with people who are not looking to be transparent, who are not looking to build respect and collaboration. And we have the power to walk away from those conversations and to say, this is not a healthy conversation or a safe conversation or a productive conversation. I think we should either stop talking or pause this and walk away, and show them and give them practical tools on how to do that. And so we kind of end our HeartSet section by talking about and giving them a real kind of roadmap of, here is how you have a co-creating collaborative conversation We use the example of group work as kind of the framework for this, right? Because every student has had a bad group project. We've probably all had bad group projects in our experience. And so it's a really relevant idea where they can go, we've either all been the good group member, right? The leader, and we've all had the bad group member, and showing them how they can work together and communicate and work through things like bias and perception and have a safe collaborative conversation. And then we end this kind of heart set section with this activity called walk and talk, where we say, great, we just spent the last hour doing these activities, talking about self-awareness and empathy and trust and values and communication. Let's go practice. Let's go have a collaborative, healthy conversation around heart set with the person sitting next to you. And so they get to leave the room. They get to go walk around campus or walk around the UC if it's snowing, but just be able to connect with someone, practice some of these things, and have hopefully kind of this healthy, collaborative kind of conversation. And so let's kind of go into another activity here to kind of practice this. And normally if we were in person, I'd say like turn to your neighbor and have a little mini walk and talk, but we're virtual. So I'd love to just hear from you all either in the chat or again, come on screen. But let's do a little walk and talk. Let's talk through, this heart set idea. Is there anything that you're like, ooh, this resonates with me. I could maybe use this in my classroom. I could use this with the group of students that I work with. Is there any kind of light bulb kind of things that are popping up for you?
Sloan?
Yeah.
I think one of the challenges that I have personally is I'm an older student and I've had a lot of experiences. I've built what my ethics are, my values, and some of the younger generations, a lot different than what I grew up with. And it's like trying to kind of understand them. My daughter's 23 and we have these conversations constantly, and it's like, I don't know where she got her mindset versus what I taught her when she was younger of, the difference of, what ethics is and right and wrong. How do we as like older adults kind of break that barrier down to have a little bit more understanding to, be able to communicate with them and try to understand the differences? Everybody, you brought up the mask mandate, and that's like a hot button for everybody, but at the end of the day, it is for the good of the community, but there's also, like you said, that gray area where it kind of infringes on somebody's, maybe their ethics says that it's against my constitutional rights. So how do you offset all of that? I mean, that's a lot of stuff to really try to take in and be able to have those, positive conversations with the students, the younger students.
Yeah, that's such a great question, Stephen. I think you would have thought I planned that. I didn't, but I appreciate it. Because I think that this is where HeartSet is so critical, and how we build the program the way that we do. And so by starting HeartSet, talking about self-awareness, I need to know who I am, right? Before I can work with, lead, interact with other people, I need to lead myself. I need to know what are my values, right? What are my ethical principles? And why are those unique to me, right? And we talk a lot about the role that our experience plays in kind of building our leadership framework, the role that our identity plays in building our leadership framework. And so when we have this self-awareness as the foundation, right, we start there, then we can go, okay, I know who I am, right? And I feel good, right? You said, like, I know what my ethical principles are. And I'm sure your daughter, like, they know what theirs are. Then we begin to have the conversation of empathy and trust. So first we start with, I need to know who I am. Then we talk about empathy, and we talk about the role that empathy plays, right? and that empathy is this place of seeing other people and not saying your experience is my experience, right? It's saying I have my experience and I have your experience. There might be similarities, right? Where I can go, ooh, I experienced something similar and I can feel that, right? Other times it's just sitting with someone going, I have no idea why you're so upset about this or why you care so much about this thing. I don't care about it that way, but can I sit with you in that? Can I listen? Can I learn more about why you're upset about this and I'm not upset about it, right? You're upset, we'll use the mask mandate. You're upset about the mask mandate. I'm not upset with the mask mandate. I want to understand why. Not to prove you wrong, not to argue and debate you, to understand you more as a person, right? And so beginning to help students understand that empathy is not a tool of debate. It's not a tool of argument. It's a tool of connection, right? And that we use empathy to build trust, right? Empathy is the tool to build trust. And so then we lead into this idea of trust and doing an activity with them that kind of says like, you know, what does trust mean to me, right? And what does it look like when trust is broken? And how is it hard to rebuild trust when it's broken? And beginning to show them the connection of trust comes from connection and understanding. Then we go into values, right? And we talk about kind of what that self-awareness piece again, reinforcing what are your values? And then they look at a table of people around them and they realize that none of us picked the same values. Or maybe we both picked honesty, but we have different definitions of what is honesty. So again, showing them the uniqueness and difference that's in the room. To go, oh, you're a leader, I'm a leader, you value this, I value this. Those unique sets of values are what make us strong leaders as individuals, right? Then we add in this final piece of communication. Then we're able to say, now, how do we actually talk to one another, right? How do we begin to listen to one another? Because we know who we are, right? We've built that self-awareness. We've built and understand what our values are at this current time. We understand the role of empathy and trust in connecting and building with other people. How can we sit in that space together where we can say, I think this way, Steve, you think this way. Let's get to Judith Glasser's it's this great theory called conversational intelligence. And we use this idea of hers called a bridge of understanding, right? How do we get to a bridge of understanding that doesn't say, I'm going to forsake all of my ideas and all of my values to align with yours. That's the only way that we can collaborate and work together. No, I can hold firm in my beliefs and my values and my principles, and you can hold firm in yours. A bridge of understanding is saying, how do we meet in the middle? And there's certain things that don't change. And there's other things that we can say, okay, we might not agree on this, but can we agree on this? Right? Or you don't know, we can't. Okay, then how do we move past this and find other things? And that's where we get to that place of unsafe and uncomfortable, right? Sometimes we can work through that tension, right? And sometimes we can say like, okay, you think this, I think this, and this is a collaborative, ongoing conversation that takes a lot of practice, right? We don't tell students like, go have collaborative, hard conversations with every single person you meet. Like, we tell them like, you have to start with that self-awareness, that place of empathy. Is this a safe person to have this conversation with? Do we both want to get to a shared meaning? And if the answer is no, then that's not a person to have that conversation with, right? Because you're not in a place to have a collaborative conversation on that topic. Does that mean you can't work with them on another topic? Of course you can. But there might be certain things that maybe you aren't talking about because it's not a safe, healthy, collaborative conversation. And so teaching students the difference in that is important, right? Because then they can begin to understand, what am I walking into, right? What can I open and create and build? And what are things that I'm like, I might actually need to bring someone else in to help with this conversation. I might not need to have that conversation, right? And most of the time we can get to that place of having the collaborative, right? But there are times where we have to say, this isn't going to be a healthy, it's going to be harmful, And I need to be able as a leader to walk away from that conversation or to not bring it into this part of the conversation. And so kind of helping them kind of in that way. So I want to kind of just move into kind of our last little piece here and kind of where we're kind of ending our program and kind of the last kind of place that we're kind of weaving in these ethical principles. And that's in our leadership pathways. And so our leadership pathways is kind of that next step. It's the now what, right? You just spent 5 hours with us learning about all these great things. What are you going to do next? And so we do what's called an intention survey with them, which is where they set their goals. And we kind of give them different kind of framework questions to do that. And then we provide them a booklet, like a literal booklet full of ads from campus partners across UCCS that say, here is just access to so many different leadership development opportunities on this campus. And this is just a few, it's a starting point for them to get ideas of like, oh, I didn't know I could be a student ambassador. That sounds really cool. Great, here's the information of how to do that, right? It gets them that direction point. What we're weaving in this spring is really focusing on the idea of accountability and viability. And my amazing student ambassador, Alicia, and I are going to really focus on that this spring of building on this idea of leadership legacy. Who are you accountable to, right? If your role is to lead yourself and others, that means you're accountable to yourself and others. And so how are you taking advantage of the college experience and the opportunity you have to experiment and explore while in college? And so that's what we're going to be weaving in a little bit more this spring as we kind of build on some of these ideas. So kind of just recap, and then we'll do some questions and answers. So the first, just a reminder on a couple key things we talked about a lot this last hour, is that ethics are woven into leadership. And the more we can highlight that and show students that it's not this thing that we just need when we're in trouble or when we're in a dilemma, that it's as natural as breathing. It's a part of so many elements. And we can point those things out when a student says something, we're like, oh, that's ethics, right? Like to be able for them to see that is critical. To explain the role of tension in ethics, right? And that it's important that we work that ethical muscle, that we're constantly kind of learning and growing about our leadership. So when we're in tension, when we need to lean on those principles more, we're already well rehearsed in them. And then finally, the difference between being an effective and an ethical leader. That yes, you can be a leader and find great success and not be ethical, right? We see that. We see many countless examples of people like that in our society. But what does it really mean to be an ethical leader? And the impact of what it means to inspire and influence positive change or action. Thank you for your time today. I want to make sure we have time for any questions that you might all have.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Sloan. What we'll do is I'm going to thank everyone for coming today, and we will be able to take questions. But thank you, Sloan. Very, very insightful presentation.